Hi everyone! This is the second half of my first Rammstein experience. And if you haven't seen the first half, you should definitely check it out. There's a link here. So after my first listen, I took time, like I usually do, to do a bit of research about the band, mostly though digging into the song itself. It's interesting to me that the characters in the little movie screenplay are the members of the band themselves. And I gather that this is what they're doing with each one of their songs when they decide to shoot a video for it. They themselves feature in that little movie. This is a band of singers which seems to have decided to go beyond music alone, and they've stepped into acting as well. Well, I'm no expert on movies and acting, but I think they did a pretty good job of it. And as would be expected, the little movie which goes with the song, they planned it very carefully. I read a bit about how they developed it. I found out that they spent a lot of time debating where to do it. Should it be by the sea, out in the sea? Would it be based on Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Match Girl? But eventually they settled for the mountains, and they shot it in the Kaun Valley and on the Piz Valley Glacier in Tyrol, Austria. I especially enjoy how they use eye contact in the movie part to convey meaning, where they're glancing their eyes, how they're timing their looks. They put a lot of thought into it. As far as the song itself, it's simple. It's very simple. It's based on a 5-chord progression throughout the entire song. It starts on a D minor, like this, and then it goes to A minor, which is your dominant minor, and then it moves to the G minor, which is your subdominant minor, and then it goes down to the F major. That's the only major chord we ever experience in the song. And then back to A minor. And the same thing repeats from D minor over and over and over and over again for more than 20 times. I didn't count precisely, but I know it's at least 20, if not more. This makes it what I call a sticky piece of music. It really sticks in your mind. And the funny thing is that the night after my first listen experience, I woke up in the middle of the night and realized that I had been dreaming the music. The tune was in my mind, the chord progressions were in my mind, and that often happens when a piece is really set up to stick with you. They said it in minor key. Well, if you've listened to the song, you know it's rather pensive. It's very expressive. And minor keys do that very well, especially in our Western art tradition of music. We associate the minor sound with a lot of emotion, a lot of feeling, a lot of depth. And that's what we find here. Our home is D minor. And that works well. All the different minor chords, even though there aren't a lot, they do a nice job of setting up this pensive, thoughtful, and emotional feeling. Interestingly, in a minor piece of music, we very often have the second most common chord, called the dominant. We very often have it being major. It gives a nice contrast. So let's say this is home. Then our dominant, which is a very powerful sound, would be And that would take us back home to... Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. I'm only saying it's very common. In this song, they avoided that. They're avoiding something that gives us this power drive back home. So our dominant, the second most common chord in the piece, is minor, and then we go back home to minor. So that was just an interesting little harmonic thing that I noticed. Like Stairway to Heaven, the musical effectiveness of this piece doesn't lie in complexity or grand inventiveness. It lies in how the various layers of instrumental sounds are handled, how the transitions from one to the next is managed, and, very importantly, the highly expressive, though very subtle, voice of the singer. Another thing that was I very much like in this song, and Vlad tells me that it's only in the movie version, and the whatever versions are out there, live or just audio recordings, don't use this, and I understand why. It doesn't really work without the movie to hold us together. But their use of silence. In the middle of the movie, the music is going on, and the story is developing, and the music is carrying us along, and then suddenly we're stopped in suspense, and the music drops dead silent instantly. It's so well timed, so artfully handled. It does a fabulous job of heightening the suspense and this sort of heart-stopping tragedy that we're observing, and enhancing the understanding of the communal concern which it represents. I feel like it suggests both isolation and connection. It implies both hope and despair. This silence brings the music to a sudden, unresolved halt and makes us wait while time does its work. And just as real-life events do to us all the time, it allows us an opportunity to scatter and lose our focus, but at the same time it's so well done that even though the opportunity is there, it is encouraging us to hold together and gather ourselves in preparation for what comes, and indeed it does come. Now, of course, this kind of music is new to me, and but I am finding a lot of similarities, and it was so interesting when I posted my announcement. I read some of your replies saying it has nothing to do with, you won't find any common ground with classical, but actually I did. I found a lot, and in fact, certain elements with which I am so familiar that this song was able to really speak to me, and I was able to relate to it, not just as this foreign entity that I'm beginning to experience, but as something that I could understand emotionally in a much easier way than some of the others I've tried out so far. Well, I want to start by talking a little bit about folk music. This piece kind of, in many ways, it's similar to folk music. And of course, I'm going to talk about German folk music because it's a German song. But folk music always is built on simple harmonic structure, simple melody. It's songs and music that has been passed down from generation to generation, and it's not meant to be this high, elaborate, intellectual piece of art. It's something different, but it is very, should I say, immediate. It's very relevant, and the people to whom that music belongs, it really speaks to the soul of the people, as I like to say. And an example of this would be in the German folk music, I'm going to use an example called Zogen, einst, fünf, wilde, Schwäne. I think I pronounced that right. I'm not super good. But anyway, I'm going to put a link on the screen, and I'll also put it below, of the folk version so you can get an idea of the simple little tune, and you'll notice that Rammstein's tune is not much more elaborate or developed than this little tune. You'll also notice that Rammstein's music is presented in a much more developed, sophisticated, expressive manner than the way this tune is presented here. So I'm going to give you another version of it. The same tune, the same melody, the same folk song. This time it's being sung by actually a very highly regarded classical singer of some decades ago. And so he has a lot more experience in the subtleties of expression. And I want you to listen to each of the verses and how he sings them. The first one is kind of the setup. The next one is talking about trees. There were five trees. I forget which kind of tree it was. But anyway, and they're growing here, and you hear his voice gets very lush, and you feel like you're just watching this verdant scene. The third verse sets the scene of 5 young men going off to war, and his voice becomes harder. It's not just the instruments changing. His voice becomes much more determined, and powerful, and strong. He's painting the lyrics. He's building a picture with the sound of his voice. And the final verse is about the 5 maidens left at home who never got married because, it's a story referring to the tragedies of war and so forth. But the idea is you hear him suddenly become very tender, and his voice communicates that. I bring that up because one of the things you'll notice in my first listen video when you watch it, if you haven't already, is that I'm commenting along the way about the subtleties and the expressiveness of the singer in this song by Rammstein. That is something that my ear is tuned to notice because of my background, and I very much enjoyed finding it in this particular song. Well, you'll notice in the folk song that I linked you to here, even when the second version is being sung, it's not shifting and changing a lot, word to word or line to line. It's a verse, and each verse, the sound changes. But there is a kind of music which requires dramatic and subtle and constant changing. It's very demanding on the singer, and it originated in Germany. We refer to it as German Lieder. Well, Lied simply is the German word for song, but this is a type of song, type of composition, which developed in what we call the Romantic era of classical music, basically the 1800s, roughly. So I want to talk a little bit about this Lieder because I want you to understand and be able to see what I found in Rammstein. Well, of course, coming from the Romantic era, the focus then in art, whether it was painting or music or poetry, was primarily focused on nature and the wonders of the natural world, or the personal experiences of love and loss. So when I first read the text to Rammstein, I instantly noticed it's the same content as in terms of ideas. That's a similarity that I noticed right away in the lyrics. All songs have lyrics, but in many cases, the tune comes first. Well, with Lieder, the opposite is true. The poet is often more than the composer's equal. They chose texts from writers like Goethe, Heine, Eichendorff, and the composer's aim is to give this poem a heightened existence through applying their own vision and imaginative skill as they compose the music for it. The song's melody and text are the singer's responsibility. But then, of course, there's the addition of a piano accompaniment, and the composers created subtle, sometimes highly complex music for the pianist to play that adds harmony and character to the whole. And the greatest Lieder composers managed to conjure an astonishing variety of narratives, moods, and atmospheres, so that the end result is this incredible synthesis of word and tone, sometimes employing only very minimalist means, but it takes the listener's breath away. Performers have to be very word aware when presenting a poem through this musical prism, so to speak. And so in the classical world, there are singers, artists, whose names have become legendary for their artistic talent and ability in that way. I want to give you an example of this kind of music as well. And I've chosen Johannes Brahms' song called von ewiger Liebe, sung by a legendary Lieder master, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau. You'll see the link here, and it's also beneath the video. Now I want to go, once you've listened to that, I want us to go back to this Ohne Dich. Because if you hear that song, you hear how the singer is shaping every line, every contour of the music. His tone is changing. Sometimes he changes the way he handles consonants in order to heighten what is happening within the musical ideas. You hear that happening in Ohne Dich. Of course, this is not German Lieder in the sense of something by Brahms. But it was so enjoyable to me to hear the singer doing this kind of tonal coloring and shaping and handling of these details, which really enhanced the end result. I read that translations don't do very well with Rammstein's lyrics because they have a tendency to use a lot of wordplay and double meanings. I don't know enough German. You can tell by my pronunciation and stumbling through German words. I don't know enough German to be able to pick up on many textual subtleties. Perhaps our German members of this community would like to try to communicate some of that to us if it exists in this song. I'm sure there must be some that exist in here, perhaps. So that would be an interesting thing for me to discover more, although I am limited with the language. But I do notice that they do the same with the music and the imagery. And this is one of the things that keeps the whole song from being monotonous and dull. For example, if you're being guided by the lyrics and you begin to read the words of the song, you immediately get the impression that this is a love song. But if you then look at the movie, you begin to understand that it is also about brotherhood. Furthermore, you can take it on a surface level and enjoy it in a very simple manner. but it also asks us to be interpreting it symbolically, both at a personal level and on a community level. As I already mentioned, Rammstein goes beyond the writing and playing of the music and adds acting to express even more ideas. For example, the scene after Till falls. As he's lying there on the ground, a normal movie or real life we would expect to see someone rather bruised and battered. If they're not dead already, they're probably crying out in pain. And it's not only the physical pain, but the terror that one feels inside after such a sudden catastrophe. You know, am I going to live? Am I going to die? But in this movie, all you see is Till's face. And he is completely unaware, unrecognizing of what has just happened to himself. It's clear with the imagery that what we're looking at is the depths of his sadness and loneliness, which is suggesting that nothing can be greater in his heart than the pain of losing a friend, not even going through such an accident. And it's interesting. I said a moment ago that the lyrics imply a love song. And yes, they do if we read on a surface level. But when you actually go back and look more closely, I noticed that they don't explicitly speak about the loss of a lover. There is a she at the beginning. But actually, there's no hint as to the nature of the relationship. It could be a lover. It could be a mother. It could be a best friend. It could be a sister. It could be a daughter. Or she could simply be a representation of any relationship. So Rammstein combines lyrics with music and visuals in such a masterful way, I think, in order to describe the tragedy of broken or lost human relationships. So as I was listening to this song and experiencing it and getting into it some more, I really began to feel like it's a song about relationships. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought it really seems fitting to set these ideas, which, if we follow them where they can take us, they can become quite profound. They're set to very simple, ordinary music, which, in my mind, is pointing us and our attention to the fact that these things take place in our ordinary, everyday lives and connections. This is the life that we all live and that we all experience. And in this manner, the music is keeping us grounded in the reality that this stuff belongs to us all. And each of us has an experience and an impact on the lives and world around us. So I feel like Rammstein, at least this little glimpse that I've had into something of their creation, they seem to be very good at playing with double meanings. They've taken a very personal, individualistic story and made it to speak in a very non-individualistic way. And they managed to do so without being dismissive of the personal, individual experience. They themselves have said that the main message of this song is stay together. No matter what, leave no man behind. It is a song about friendship, brotherhood, humanity, community, and the impact and the responsibility of those relationships. How do I feel about it? Well, I guess you can tell already that I enjoyed this piece. I was able to get into it and relate to it on more than just an intellectual level, fairly quickly. It's powerfully expressive, it's sensitive, and it manages to tackle some profound topics without coming across as pretentious. If you want to go back, if you haven't watched it yet, or if you want to go back and watch my first listen again to see how I first felt about this song, here's the link again. You can click it or you can follow it below the video in the description here. Now, Vlad told me this song is not really representative of Rammstein's typical music style, which he tells me is called industrial metal. I don't think I've listened to any industrial metal yet, but I would say that I don't find anything industrial about this song at all. But that's also interesting to me because I appreciate that they seem to be versatile enough to create something like this, which seems to stand very nicely from my perspective, even if it's outside of their standard style. And this level of creativity makes me curious to look more into their signature style. So I'll definitely be coming back to Rammstein again sometime in the future, maybe at some point when I feel brave enough to tackle something called industrial metal. Until then, I'm looking forward to my next first listen, whatever that's going to be. I have not decided it yet. And I will see you soon, whenever that next one is, here on Virgin Rock.